In the shadowy corridors of power, there exists a man whose name is seldom mentioned in the textbooks of history, but whose influence has shaped the world we live in today. Maurice Strong, often referred to as one of the architects of modern environmentalism, ideas also seeded what we now call woke culture. The pervasive belief that the world must be fundamentally restructured to address issues of social justice, environmental stewardship, and global equity. Born into the windswept prairies of Canada during the Great Depression, Strong grew up in a world of scarcity, a world teetering on the brink of collapse. But unlike most, Maurice Strong saw opportunity where others saw despair. By the age of 16, he had already left home, determined to carve out a place for himself in a world that was changing rapidly. The world was shifting from the old empires to the new global order, and Strong was at the forefront of this change. He began his career in the oil industry, a sector that symbolized the very lifeblood of the industrial age. Yet, paradoxically, it was here, amidst the machines and the oil rigs, that Strong became deeply concerned about the planet's future. His vision extended beyond the narrow corridors of corporate power, reaching out to the global stage, where the real decisions were made. Strong had his start as a petroleum entrepreneur and became president of Power Corporation until 1966. It was at this point that a fateful relationship would change the course of his life. Maurice Strong caught the attention of the Rockefeller Foundation, an institution that, in many ways, was the architect of the modern global system. Rockefellers were known for their vast wealth and influence, but also for their interest in shaping the world through philanthropy and social engineering. They saw in Strong a kindred spirit, a man who understood the power of networks and who shared their vision of a global society. With the backing of the Rockefeller Foundation, Strong's influence grew. He was now operating on a new level, connecting with the world's most powerful leaders, laying the groundwork for a future where environmental concerns and social justice would take center stage. His involvement with the Rockefellers provided him with the resources and connections needed to influence international policy. In 1972, he became the driving force behind the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, held in Stockholm. This was a turning point, a moment when environmental issues were first brought to the forefront of global policy. The Stockholm Conference was not just a gathering of diplomats. It was the birth of the modern environmental movement. For the first time, world leaders acknowledged that environmental degradation was not just a local issue, but a global one, demanding collective action.
The whole city of Stockholm was caught up in the conference. The conference symbol appeared everywhere, and the pre-conference publicity brought thousands of unofficial observers from all over the world to Stockholm. The government of Sweden provided facilities for all of them. At Skarpnäck, an abandoned airfield on the outskirts of town, it even set up a tent city for the many young people who could not pay for lodgings. Members of official delegations were supplied with new model Swedish cars. But this was a different kind of conference. The delegates were also offered the use of 200 bicycles, ecologically a more apt means of transportation.
Now, we've gone out of the period when we can just simply think that anything is possible. Man has sobered up somewhat, and the environment issue has made him realize that he does have to make very hard choices. He hasn't got it made. He can't have it always. He's got to decide, and in deciding, it's the deeper sense of values which is finally going to determine what he decides. Now, I believe that the general public has sensed this. They have realized, I think, when they see a dirty beach, when a little child points up the fact that, Daddy, look at the water's dirty, when they sense the fact that despite the tremendous material progress that has been made in some of our societies, that actual living conditions have deteriorated. The number of alternatives available for the citizen in his private life in many of the cities of the world have actually diminished. He realizes that pure material economic growth is not the answer, and it makes him confront the basic questions of values.
Environmental declaration, that they're going to look after the oceans, that they're going to take a new look at the redistribution of world resources. Okay, it sounds splendid, but what guarantee have we that you don't mesmerize yourself by saying a thing is going to happen and then somehow kid yourself that it has happened? It hasn't happened, it will be very difficult, and it'll only happen in fact if there are enough citizens and enough people in this world who have this new vision and are prepared to stay with it, not only when they're young, but when they're infinitely decrepit. In other words, right through and right on.
I would not say I am disappointed. I think under the circumstances, 4 years after politicians in particular and people in general began to realize we were in the middle of an environmental crisis, I think Maurice Strong has done an absolute miracle of even getting people to come here and putting together this sort of conference. At the same time, we have to be extremely critical of the point of view that simply turning the old economic crank faster is going to somehow close the gap between the rich and the poor. We've tried that particular game. We've tried it now for 20 years or so, and proportionally the rich keep getting richer and the poor do not catch up.
Strong's career was a masterclass in duality as he ascended the ranks of international diplomacy. Organizing landmark environmental conferences, he simultaneously maintained a robust presence in the corporate world. In 1976, at the request of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, Strong returned to Canada to head the newly created national oil company, Petro-Canada. He then became chairman of the Canada Development Investment Corporation, the holding company for some of Canada's principal government-owned corporations. This dual life allowed him to bridge gaps between industrialists and environmentalists, but it also sowed the seeds of suspicion. His approach to consensus building was both his strength and his Achilles heel. Strong excelled at bringing disparate groups together in private, luxurious settings, from Rocky Mountain retreats to Swiss alpine getaways. This approach, while effective in fostering agreements, also fueled accusations of secretive collusion. Critics viewed his behind-closed-doors methods as indicative of a hidden agenda. These criticisms extended to allegations of Strong's involvement in a so-called one world government.
If it is true that the environment is a global issue, if it is true that we are faced with the need of managing our global society as a physical whole, it is surely also true that we must learn to manage it as an economic and social whole, and that we cannot do this in the face of the very serious social and economic imbalances that exist in this world. Surely, what this compels us to face is dimensions of cooperative behavior that go beyond anything we have yet experienced. Surely it compels us to face the need for extending into international life those concepts of equity and justice and equal opportunity, which, however imperfectly, at least do form the basis for the relationships amongst people within nation states.
Maurice Strong's personal life was as complex as his public endeavors. His marriage to Danish-born artist Hannah Marstrand led to their purchase of farmland in Crestone, Colorado, an area that became a reflection of Strong's vision for a new way of living. The Crestone project was intended as a blend of spirituality and environmentalism, embodying Strong's belief that humanity must coexist harmoniously with nature. Strong donated land around Baker to various religious, indigenous, environmental, and New Age groups, while using those groups' presence to sell lots to various high flyers. Robert McNamara, president of the World Bank, Mary and Lawrence Rockefeller, Najib Halabi, former Pan Am CEO, and the King of Jordan's father-in-law. Strong also arranged for the Aspen Institute to move some programs to Baker. The accusations weren't just about his politics or environmentalism, they were far more disturbing. Some said, Strong wasn't just an environmentalist but a high priest of a New Age religion, using his influence to push for a one-world government and a planetary order rooted in spiritual mysticism. His connection to figures like Shirley MacLaine and his vision for Boca Grande as a spiritual center fueled this narrative. Critics claimed he wasn't saving the planet. He was orchestrating a global cult.
Meditations, enlightenments, on how to make one better world. The leaders are asked to meditate and be involved because this is part of their instruction, of brainwashing, and all this is part of the conditioning for the vision of a new world or of a new age.
This guruistic system in politics is very dangerous for our democratic society. It will at least bring a loss of freedom, a loss of security, and a big danger for all mankind. So I believe Guruism is preparing the world for some political fascism too.
Conspiracy theorists depicted him as a mastermind behind a totalitarian global regime, a eugenicist advocating for depopulation, and a hypocrite. Simultaneously, a communist opposing economic growth, and a capitalist exploiting environmentalism for personal gain. The Rio Earth Summit built on the foundation laid in Stockholm, leading to the creation of key international agreements like the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Framework Convention on Climate Change.
The ability of the world to solve these problems depends in large measure upon drawing more people into the process and hearing what they have to say from their perspectives, which have too often been neglected in the past.
Hello, I'm Severin Suzuki, speaking for ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization. We're a group of 12 and 13-year-olds trying to make a difference. Vanessa Setti, Morgan Geisler, Michelle Quigg, and me. We've raised all the money to come here ourselves, to come 5,000 miles to tell you adults you must change your ways.
And my gratitude to Secretary General Maurice Strong for his tireless work in bringing this Earth Summit together. This is truly an historic gathering.
The Rio Earth Summit built on the foundation laid in Stockholm, leading to the creation of key international agreements like the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Framework Convention on Climate Change. It was here that the concept of sustainable development, balancing economic growth with environmental protection, became a cornerstone of global policy.
We cannot be complacent unless the agreements reached here are accompanied by real commitments to significant change. Change, of course, indeed, for the human species, for a moment in the 21st century where the condition of our species may become terminal.
While the summit succeeded in launching Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable development in the 21st century, Strong's vision for a more ambitious Earth Charter, a set of ethical principles guiding humanity's relationship with the planet, was met with resistance and ultimately remained unadopted. However, the ideas embedded in the Earth Charter persisted, influencing future frameworks. Decades later, in 2015, these principles found renewed life in the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, adopted at the Paris Climate Conference, which carried forward Strong's dream of a global commitment to sustainability, albeit in a more structured and politically palatable form.
And that's why at Rio I presented a proposal to world leaders that they adopt a kind of Magna Carta for the Earth, an Earth Charter.
Agenda 21?
Yeah, no, well, that was the practical agenda for implementing it. No, I proposed that they adopt an Earth Charter, a statement of moral and ethical principles to guide the conduct of people and nations towards the Earth and towards each other. They weren't ready for it at that point. We went part way in that direction. So Mikhail Gorbachev and I joined together and brought a lot of other people together. Stephen Rockefeller, just one of the guiding lights in this and in the drafting process of producing a people's Earth Charter. And now millions of people around the world have signed on to this. And now, as we
it came into final form. I mean,
yes, it is. It is,
and it is called
the Earth
Yet,
Charter.
it was Strong's audacious comparison of the document to the Ten Commandments that ignited a firestorm of controversy. He claimed that, in time, the Earth Charter would be revered just as much as the sacred laws given to Moses. To many, this was blasphemy, a New Age creed disguised as environmentalism, attempting to replace deeply held religious traditions with secular, globalist ideals. Religious groups recoiled at the idea of equating a man-made document with divine law. For Strong's critics, this statement encapsulated their worst fears, that he was not merely pushing for environmental change, but for a radical reordering of moral and spiritual priorities, a new planetary order where traditional values were subverted in favor of the technocratic. It was through these connections that Strong became closely associated with the World Economic Forum, an organization that would come to play a crucial role in global governance. Strong was a key advisor to Klaus Schwab, the founder of the forum, and together they envisioned a future where global issues, environmental, economic, and social, could be managed by a new kind of international cooperation. Strong's influence was instrumental in shaping the agenda of the World Economic Forum, turning it into a platform where the world's elites could discuss and design the future. One of the most controversial aspects of Strong's vision was his belief in the necessity of engineered economic downturns to reset the global economy. He argued that the only way to prevent environmental catastrophe was to curtail growth, even if it meant creating economic hardship. This idea, radical at the time, has since been echoed in discussions about sustainable development and the limits of growth. Strong's belief in the need to disrupt the existing economic order to achieve long-term environmental goals would lay the groundwork for what some see as deliberate attempts to manage or even engineer economic crisis. Maurice Strong has warned of a dire scenario that could unfold, as he revealed in an article by Elaine Dewar in West magazine. He suggests that a conflict might arise between wealthy polluting nations and the impoverished Third World. This group of world leaders, he continues, form a secret society to bring about an economic collapse. It's February. They're all at Davos. These aren't terrorists. They're world leaders. They have positioned themselves in the world's commodity and stock markets. They've engineered, using their access to stock exchanges and computers and gold supplies, a panic. Then they prevent the world's stock market from closing. They jam the gears. They hire mercenaries who hold the rest of the world leaders at Davos as hostages. The markets can't close. The rich countries, and Strong makes a slight motion with his fingers as if he were flicking a cigarette butt out the window. I sat there spellbound. This is not any storyteller talking. This is Maurice Strong. He knows these world leaders. He is, in fact, co-chairman of the Council of the World Economic Forum. He sits at the fulcrum of power. 1995. Iraq, crippled by the weight of UN sanctions, was granted a lifeline, the Oil for Food program. It was designed to ease the suffering of ordinary Iraqis, allowing the sale of oil in exchange for food, medicine, and essentials. But this well-intentioned program became something far darker, a maze of corruption that allowed money and power to shift hands under the guise of humanitarian aid. By the early 2000s, the scandal had grown too big to ignore. Paul Volcker, former US Federal Reserve Chairman, led an inquiry that peeled back the layers of deception. What he uncovered was a web of bribes, kickbacks, and illegal oil trades that snaked its way through the highest offices of the United Nations. In 2005, the scandal took a turn. Investigators found Strong's name attached to $1 million payment from a Jordanian bank. A check he had endorsed, the money, funneled through South Korean businessman Tongsun Park, was tied to the Iraqi regime. Park would later be convicted for his role in the scheme, acting as an unregistered agent for Saddam Hussein. While Strong's legacy began to crumble, Strong denied any involvement in Park's dealings, claiming ignorance. But the stain on his name was indelible. Resigning from his post, he vanished from the spotlight, leaving for China, a nation whose rise reflected a new kind of global power, where silence and secrecy reigned, and where Strong, too, would find his final refuge. A nation whose rapid ascent in the global order aligned with Strong's vision of a world where environmentalism and economic power could coexist. In China, he became an honorary professor at Peking University and continued to work quietly behind the scenes, influencing the country's environmental policies and leveraging his network to guide China's place in the global environmental movement. Upon his death in 2015, Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, called him a mentor, indispensable advisor, and friend.
Distinguished guests, dignitaries, friends, Hannah. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here today to pay tribute to an unforgettable Canadian, Maurice Strong. Just last week, my team and I attended the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and we were given the chance to proudly represent Canada on the world stage. And for a long time, as an integral part of the WEF, Maurice helped to shape a forum for honest discussion for bettering the state of the world. Maurice Strong leaves behind an incredible legacy. A brilliant businessman, devoted environmentalist, an inspirational philanthropist. He aspired to make the world a better place, and it's safe to say that a better world has indeed been left in his wake. His work with the United Nations was second to none. His commitment to the environment was unwavering. He was, in fact, a principal designer of the UN environmental process. We are now in an era where we recognize that our environment must be safeguarded and respected. Not only that, but that we can do this to the benefit of local and national economies.
Called upon me to do was that when I came to run the World Bank, Maurice said, look, the job's not over yet. I think I can help you in a number of ways. First of all, the World Bank is tremendously unpopular. You are very unpopular, even though you've only just arrived. But I can tell you you're my friend, and that might help you. And so I asked Maurice if he'd be a special advisor. And indeed, that's what he did. He took me around to meet people who otherwise probably wouldn't have received me. And he allowed the bank to set up a series of relationships with civil society, which was trusting and which was essential in terms of dealing with this overall question of the development of our planet.
Maurice Strong's legacy is one of both grandeur and controversy. His fingerprints are found in nearly every major environmental initiative of the late 20th century, from the Stockholm Conference to the Rio Earth Summit, where Agenda 21 was born. Through his work with the United Nations, Strong helped solidify the global movement towards sustainable development, laying the foundation for what would later become the Sustainable Development Goals. As a founding member of the Club of Rome, he was instrumental in the creation of the infamous report, The Limits to Growth, which warned of the dangers of unchecked economic expansion. Strong held influential roles as a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation and the Rothschild Foundation, further cementing his place in the world of elite power brokers. His method of bringing together governments, corporations, and spiritual communities raised both hopes for a new planetary order and fears of a hidden agenda. And despite the criticisms, he remained a co-chairman of the World Economic Forum, a mentor to Klaus Schwab, until the end of his life. But it is in these contradictions, socialist in ideology, capitalist in methodology, that Maurice Strong will be remembered. A man of immense influence and even greater mystery. His supporters saw a visionary. His critics saw a dangerous architect of global governance. Yet, either way, he left behind a world forever changed. The echoes of his ambitions, unanswered questions, and divisive legacy continue to ripple through the corridors of power.